Welcome to the MMA Happy Hour. I am Kyle Anthony, your host. We're here. We have interviews, MMA banter, and betting advice. This week, UFC 288, massive card. A lot of implications on the line here. So we have my guy, James Lynch, coming in, MMA journalist, producer at UFC Fight Pass. James, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me, Kyle. Really excited to talk about this card. It's really, I mean, of all cards for us to talk about, this is a really interesting one. A lot of close fights, and I'm excited to get into it with you.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. So this is great stuff, great stuff. And I think obviously, you know, there's a lot of great fights to talk about here, but what I'm always looking at is I'm looking at 4 or 5 fights to discuss, to kind of break down with whoever the guest is and really just kind of see what kind of nuggets we can pull out and find opportunities, value spots to place money on. So I think the first one here is, well, I guess obviously we're gonna have to dive into the main event of the evening here. So we got Aljamain Sterling here. He's minus 105. The comeback on Cejudo, or roughly, obviously it's kind of moving around, but kind of teetering there right now. So how do you see this fight here? And the other thing I really want to ask you is, how do you even look at a guy? Because I can tell you my tactics here that I'm trying to leverage. But a guy being out 3 years, so what's your kind of thought on this and the thought on someone kind of, not being around for 3 years?
It's really tricky, right? You mentioned the 3-year layoff. And then I think the other thing that people are kind of glancing over very easily is just the Cejudo success at bantamweight. It really hasn't, like, the majority of his career has been at 125. I think people really overlook that. If you look at sort of the body of work he's done. So the 2 wins he's had at bantamweight, obviously Marlon Moraes, the title fight. I was in Chicago for that one. Great fight, good comeback win, getting it done. I shouldn't even say comeback, but it was a very close fight leading up to the finish. And then he finishes Dominic Cruz. And we know the stand-up has really improved tremendously. Basically, since Cejudo got knocked out by Demetrius Johnson, he's really worked on that. We've seen that in a lot of different fights. So obviously stylistically, there is a favorite there in terms of what Cejudo is able to do. But you mentioned it there, the 3-year layoff. I think we oftentimes, as fans, we often, romanticize about the fighter that was, not the fighter that is. And I think that this is a case where, I can't just sit here and say that Cejudo is going to be exactly the same as he was when he fought Dominic Cruz. So that's where I have a hard time picking Cejudo in this fight because of the fact that he hasn't fought in that long. And, listen, here's another thing that I think people kind of glance over. I know Cejudo, Olympic athlete, the guy's competed at every level, he's looked great, but he hasn't trained for a fight in such a long time too. There's a difference between being in the gym and training for a fight. Sterling has fought far more often here, and I think there's a couple weird things that are going on with Sterling. Okay, let's state the obvious, right? I mean, people don't like Sterling because of the whole thing that happened with Piotr Jan in his first fight.
That's still lingering. That's still lingering.
But I think that does blind people a lot to how good Sterling is. Now, the second fight with Jan, I see people calling robbery on that. It was close. I thought Sterling won. I don't have an issue with him giving them the fight. And then we can just throw the Dillashaw fight out the window. Dillashaw was injured going in there. You can't really take much away. I think the fight that nobody's talking about is the Corey Sandhagen fight. He's the only fighter in UFC in his career period that has finished Corey Sandhagen, and that's a fight that has aged very well in terms of that win on his resume. And you look at some of the other names he's beat, Jimmy Rivera. I mean, the list goes on. Sterling has a good resume at bantamweight leading up, and not to mention the fact this is a big guy for the weight class. Like, Cejudo is not going to have the reach that Sterling's going to have. Cejudo, Sterling, I don't think could ever make 125, right? Like, so there's got to be a bit of a strength advantage there for Sterling as well. Right. I just think people are banking way too much on the Cejudo knockout, which I don't think will come. Yes, Sterling's been knocked out by Marlon Moraes, but that's the only time we've seen him get finished, that period in his career. So I think what happens is I think Sterling survives the early onslaught from Cejudo. I think the fight goes longer. I know there's questions about Sterling's cardio, but I just feel like the fact that he's been more active, he's a little bit younger, I think he goes up there and wins the decision. I don't know if it's going to be pretty, but to me, the second Jan fight really showed us that, look, he is this top bantamweight that we all thought he was. And I think he goes out there and proves that. And to me, I feel more comfortable picking Sterling at this point because of the activity level and just the fact that he's performed better at bantamweight overall, in my opinion, than Cejudo has. I can't take 2 wins that Cejudo's had as enough evidence for me to pick him over Sterling. I just can't do it.
Yeah, and even what you're saying about the 3-year layoff to me is always obviously your timing, all those things. Everybody always, fighters always talk about that. Obviously, you know that better than me talking to them. But one of the things I was looking at, even the last 3 fights for Cejudo, I thought was not as impressive as 3 years ago when we looked at it. You know what I mean? Is that TJ Dillashaw came down in weight. He looked atrocious. He looked terrible. Couldn't even take a punch. He went out. Marlon Moraes, to your point, the guy looked like a killer. All of a sudden, you know what I mean? Now he's 1-7 out of his last 8 and just has not looked good at all. And then even with Dominic Cruz, he was out 4 years, comes back on, I guess, somewhat short notice or kind of whatever that was. and he beats him there, and then he retires. So I think that's part of it. And even the other part for me really is going to be the fact that and again, to your point, how undersized he is for bantamweight. You know, people keep remembering, oh, look what he's done. Look how he's done all these things. But the 7-inch reach advantage, the 3-inch height advantage, I think are things that really Sterling can kind of work from range, work at distance. And even on the takedowns, I know that they're going to be there. Cejudo will absolutely have those opportunities to get these takedowns. But when you're looking at it, I like the fact that Aljo is good off his back. He's aggressive. Yeah. He can do a lot of things off of his back, where even that's probably the best case scenario where Cejudo could be. And it's dangerous. It's not some comfort spot where he can kind of lay and pray. So I got to go with Aljo too here. I think it makes a lot of sense. And again, and then you spring, and I'm trying not to always go to that 3-year layoff, because I feel like that's an easy kind of angle, because there's so many other things that I think really favors Aljo.
Yeah, no, and one other thing I'll bring up, because I do see people making this comparison. Well, look what John Jones did to Cyril Gane. Aljamain Sterling is not Cyril Gane. Aljamain Sterling is far more well-rounded. And, you know, we talk about the wrestling with Cejudo. Look who he trains with, Merab Dvalishvili. This guy can get a takedown or two as well. Obviously not the same type of wrestling, but I just think Sterling has a lot going for him in this fight. And I do feel like in a lot of cases, it's people that don't like Aljo that are overlooking a lot of the good things that he does.
No, I agree. And the one stat that I heard, it's between flyweight and welterweight fighters who are 35 and older. Yeah. Are 2 and 22 in title fights, and Henry's on the wrong side of that. That's another little sprinkle nugget. You know, like you're saying, you never can really tell in these kinds of things, but boy, that trend looks pretty good for Aljo.
Yeah, it does. It does for sure. Not that Aljo's super young himself, but again, the activity level's been there. He's been performing well. Those are all positives to me. To me, it's all about evidence. And to me, there's more evidence of Sterling that favors Sterling than there does Cejudo at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, all right, we're on the same side of that one right now. We're on the same side of that one there. The other we're going to be talking about here is Jessica Andrade versus Yan Jourdain, or Shonan Yan, however we're going to say it there. You got -200 here, and you got Shonan +154. I know that last setup there with Blanchfield really has a lot of people's, bad taste in their mouth there. Kind of, how do you see this one going?
So this is really tricky, and I want people to be careful about this fight, because I do see a lot of people on the Andrade side, and I get it. I'm going to be picking her in this fight as well. But the thing you got to remember with Yan Jourdain is she's pretty tough to take out. Outside of that one fight with Carla Esparza, she's mainly gone the distance. Her striking has improved a lot. I think she's the better technical striker between the two. Andrade's got the power, obviously. But the thing you got to wonder as well is, like, how's Andrade going to look after that fight with Blanchfield? We're going to really find out in this fight. Is Andrade on a bit of a decline? Because she really got schooled in that fight with Blanchfield. Or is it a case of, hey, it was short notice, she fought a really good fighter in Blanchfield? We're going to find out. Not to mention the jumping between weight classes. Like, there's a lot of things there with Andrade that are a bit concerning. But what I could see happening in this fight is I could see Andrade just landing the better shots. I don't think we're going to see a finish here. It's only a 3-round fight. Obviously Andrade is like the exception to the rule. I mean, Caitlin Chukagan's not easy to finish. There's a countless list of fighters where she's, gone out there and finished them. But Yan Jourdain, the UFC just gave her a new deal. I just spoke to her actually before this fight. She's obviously riding pretty high, big win in her last fight against Mackenzie Dern. She's had a great camp at Team Alpha Male. I feel like Yan Jourdain is absolutely has the ability to win this fight. I think the play here, honestly, is the fight goes the distance. I know that sounds nuts, because Andrade does typically finish a lot of her fights here, but just in case, let's say Andrade is having an off night. Let's say she's getting a little bit tired as it goes into that third round. I think Yan, again, could have the ability here to maybe win on the judges' scorecards a little bit. But to me, this is a bit of a trap, because even though, like, again, you look at this on paper, you think, of course, Andrade with the power is going to win. Andrade might be able to knock her out. Yan Jourdain's no pushover either, and I think the last couple fights has really showed that. Yeah,
and I think we're on the same page here too, because like at first I'm like, oh yeah, Andrade should kind of run through. And then as soon as you're kind of diving through some of this tape, you kind of feel like it was a little bit of a recency bias with kind of, like you say, what happened with Carla. Carla Esparza took her down, wrestled her. It looked like she had no answers for anything. And that already just is on everybody's head saying, okay, she's going to be taken down. She's going to be dominated. You've got the bigger female. She's going to be looking to muscle her down, have that strength advantage. But I think one of the things also that's going to make it very interesting is just that how reckless Andrade can be in those exchanges. And I think that to me is, yes, she can get those takedowns. She can get that control time. That path is there, I think. But Jan's no slouch, like you're saying, but those wide power hooks, Jan is very slick on the feet. She has quick hands, good footwork. I thought a lot of that stuff in the bigger cage. Now, if this was in the Apex, I think I would be a little more nervous. I think I would be a little bit more the bull rushing that Andrade does, getting that clinch, pushing her up against the fence, and then having the ability to level change and get the takedowns. I think those are absolutely not going to be there this time because Jan can pitter-patter those shots for 3 rounds. I think she has the ability, the volume, I also think is there too. And as long as she steers clear of some of those big shots, I think she has the ability to kind of get this victory. And then at this number, plus 154, I think is a great number here. And then you can get a little bit more via points, plus 250, maybe a little bit of a sprinkle there. Like you're saying, a lot of people may think this is Andrade steamrolling, power shots, body slamming, but I'm really turned off by what happened in that last fight. Maybe it's motivation, maybe it was the short notice, but I got to go with Jan in this spot.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like I said, we're going to learn a lot about Yan Xiaonan. Again, if she didn't have that Carla Esparza fight, I might actually pick her here because that is in the back of my head. Like,
it's in everybody's mind.
But just to me, I think, like, as crazy as it sounds, I think that Andrade could just land the better power shots, and that would be enough to score on the judges because, Yan will take some damage. Judges will be like, okay, obviously we know who's landing more. Almost like a Weili and Joanna type situation, right?
True.
Like that type of thing. I can see that.
True. No, that's absolutely.
Not the second fight, the first fight, obviously.
right. All right. So you're if you had to pick one, you're going Jessica.
Yeah, I'm going Jessica here. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to go Jan, and we'll see how that goes. The next one here we're going to talk about here is Charles Jourdain. Now he's minus 192. The comeback here on Kron plus 148. Now it's kind of was teeing up this one in the beginning here is because here's another guy that kind of just went through obscurity all of a sudden after losing to Cub Swanson. This looked like it was a situation where Kron was kind of on the fast track. I kind of looked like he was they were looking at him and saying, hey, here's an opportunity. We got a Gracie, he's in here, he's doing some things. And now it kind of teetered down here. How do you see this one here? And Jourdain, explosive guy. How do you see this one kind of playing out?
This is such a weird fight, man. Like, and the fact it's even on the main card, like, there's so many odd things about it. And I guess, yeah, the Gracie name and all that. But, like, what are we really getting here with Kron Gracie, to be honest? Because, obviously the debut, he submits Alex Caceres, and, nothing against Caceres, but he's been kind of inconsistent in his career. And then the fight against Cub Swanson, like, what happened there? Like, that was a real eye opener. I think people are like, okay, we got to pump the brakes here because as good, Swanson's a vet. Obviously, he's been in there with some of the best and, everything else. But that was kind of a loss where you're kind of saying, okay, this guy isn't really what he thought, what we thought he was, so to speak here. And, his last fight, that Cub Swanson fight, was October 2019, like before the pandemic. It's just crazy that that's last repeated. So that's a huge red flag right now. Those are two big things. Now with Charles Jourdain, Charles is someone I followed forever. He's Canadian. I actually saw him fight on the regional scene against TJ Laramie in a fight. Wow. He actually lost a decision in a 5-round main event to TJ Laramie. This was years ago. But Jourdain, you look at who he's fought, some really good opposition. I don't necessarily think it's bad that he lost to Nathaniel Wood. I think the Shane Burgos fight personally could have gone the other way. He lost a majority decision there, and then he had a couple good performances. Lando Venata choking him out. Julian Arosa, he was actually winning that fight and then got choked out in the 3rd round by that one. That's right there is something that I'm a bit concerned about. Like, not that he has a bad ground game, but I mean, he's got a submission loss, and it's not that long ago, and he's fighting a guy that's really good at submission. So that's a bit of the concern there. Jourdain should win this fight just based off experience alone. Like, I think that Gracie's got, obviously the jiu-jitsu is exceptional, but outside of that, like, what is he really bringing to the table here? If Jourdain keeps his standing, I think Jourdain's got this fight in the bag. But this is honestly a fight I'm just staying away from. If I have to pick, I'm going to go Jourdain. Canadian bias aside, the experience level, the activity, the level of opposition, they all favor Jourdain. So I'm going to be picking him here by that. But I also could see someone betting this fight and you see Jourdain getting in a bad spot and getting submitted, and then you're ripping up your ticket. So that's where I'm a bit concerned here. But yeah, Jourdain should win this fight, but there's still that possibility of a submission loss too.
Yeah, and that is the biggest thing. When I was looking at this, Jourdain, he is explosive. He has a lot of weapons, but he can make mistakes, and he's a kind of guy that really just does a lot of this high-flying stuff. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and that could even be an opening for Kron because he has struggled. It's not the greatest that look against Cub Swanson, although Cub Swanson different level of a guy. He played very smart, and I thought that was interesting too, that he kind of kept distance. He tried to keep range. He tried to work at range, and he was doing what a vet would do. He's like, I don't want anything to do with this guy in the clinch or any. I'm just going to stay distance, work. Kron got, he looked way out of sorts, and I don't see Jourdain doing that. That's the only. I mean, of course he can come in with a different game plan, but I feel like just who he is, he's going to push forward. He's gonna chase him down, and that's the thing that I don't think Kron will really have to chase anyone. He's going to be in his space. I think Jourdain's going to even look for that finish, knowing I am so much more better on the feet than Kron, and I think that's where something could possibly happen. But I'm going to be going with Kron here. I just think that all he needs is one takedown, and I think the fight's over. Normally, I'm not looking to be betting those types of angles with one takedown. I just think it's so far different on the ground. Now, what has he done over the last few years? We don't know, but obviously, he's in training. He's doing his BJJ. He's probably, if anything, not coming out as some kickboxer. He's going to look for these takedowns. So I'm going to go with Kron here. The plus 148 number, I think is good. Like you said, one take, you don't want to be in the mix of this on the ground, but one takedown could be it. So yeah, I'm going to go with Kron here.
Yeah, I get it. Trust me, I do. That's why I said because I could just see people picking Jourdain, and then it goes the other way. Because like I said, the style matchup not great for Jourdain, but the activity level, the level
absolutely
does favor Charles Jourdain for sure.
Absolutely, that volume is definitely going to scare me a little bit, and when they're on the feet. But I'm going to go with it. But the last one here we're going to be talking about here, Kennedy Nzechukwu minus 184 against Devin Clark plus 142. This is an interesting one, just with the stylistic matchups. The size of both of these guys. You got the long, lanky Kennedy. You've got the bull in Clark here. So how do you see this one playing out, and who you got?
Tricky one again, too. I think the odds are off. I don't think Clark should be such. Well, I mean, I'd see the line it looks like somebody's on Devin Clark, which is good. But I remember seeing it like almost 2-1. This is a really close fight because it's two guys who've been kind of inconsistent, especially on the Kennedy side. Like there was a lot of promise when he came in. Big guy, lanky, comes to a great camp at Fortis MMA. There's been a lot of promise about him, but he's had some setbacks, right? There's fights that he should have won that he didn't. The one that really comes to mind is the Nick. I'm not even going to bother pronouncing the guy's last name, but you know who I'm talking about. The name that wouldn't fit on a hockey jersey. Lost a split decision to him, and then Don Jung knocks him out. Now, who did Don Jung just fight in his last fight? It was Devin Clark, who also defeated him quite handily. So it's a little bit interesting here. Like Devin Clark, obviously going to be at a bit of a disadvantage in terms of the height and reach, but that's the case with most of Kennedy's opponents. Kennedy is 6'5" with an 83-inch reach. Devin Clark is 6 feet tall with a 75-inch reach. It's a big discrepancy there. Clark trains at a great camp, Elevation Fight Team. He's getting the good work in. He's got a lot of good bodies in the gym. Zach Pauga, Curtis Blades, you name it. He's got, the who's who. And, when I spoke to Devin before this fight, bit of a quick turnaround for him. He doesn't mind, though. Like, obviously, I think he went home for, because people don't know, he's actually, he trains in Colorado. He's actually from South Dakota. So I think he was only home for a week with his family and then was right back in camp. So a lot of motivation here. He even told me after this fight he's going to take some time off. He wants to spend the summer with his family, so really wants to go out there and put a stamp as he goes on a bit of an extended leave after this one. But Clark's got good wrestling. This to me just kind of looks like you kind of know what you're getting with Devin Clark. Like we've seen him, actually take out a former teammate of Kennedy in Alonzo Menafield. Obviously, the cardio has always been good with Clark. But I just think Kennedy with the height and reach, I think that's going to be a problem for Clark. I don't know. I don't have the stat offhand, but I know guys that are typically bigger, he tends to kind of struggle with a little bit, at least what I've seen. And that's something where I think he's going to have trouble. Now, he could maybe go out there and out wrestle him, but you also look at where Kennedy trains. There's a lot of good wrestlers over there at Fortis. So I don't think it's going to be much of an issue here. I think it's going to be a close one. I do see Kennedy edging this one out just slightly, but this is another one where, honestly, I think if you're going to bet this, I think it's dog or pass. I don't think there's a lot of value on Kennedy at almost 2-1 odds just because of the unpredictability here. Clark has been known to show up, and that Don Jung fight, honestly, that last one, that really impressed me and made me think, okay, maybe he is kind of in that ranked spot. That's basically what this fight is. It's the fight of the winner is going to be most likely getting close to getting ranked finally, but with Devin Clark, it's just tough, man. I got to go Kennedy here.
Yeah, I kind of feel this is a dog or pass spot too, and I think the biggest thing that's always given me a little bit of the heebie-jeebies when it comes to Kennedy is just the striking doesn't seem that polished. He's good, he's got the tools, he's got the ability, he's got the size, he has all of those things. He's pretty well rounded. I just feel like that slow pace, the slow plotting movement. I think that's where Devin could find success is the fact that he is so slow. Those legs are going to be big targets for these takedowns, and he is just going to be relentless with it. And I think that the wins that he had was Kutilaba and Carl Roberson. Those two fights was like you're shooting takedowns, and then they just kind of get tired, and then he had the ability to, they just couldn't do anything, and he found the finish. I think this is a spot where Clark is going to be nonstop, heavy cardio, be pushing the pace, getting on him. There's absolutely possibility he can get sparked out in that first round because he could just be going for it. But I do like how durable he is. Clark is, we all know that he had his jaw like basically coming out of his mouth, and he still wanted to fight. So he is a tough guy. I think that kind of tilts me more towards it, where I don't want to be doing, it's minus 190 around, minus 184. That's a little bit too high price, too wide. I think Clark comes in, and I think he gets the job done. So I do like the plus money here, plus 142. I think is a good spot here.
Yeah, I can see it. Like I said, dog or pass, I think if you're going to bet. I just think though, like the height and the reach and, some of the damage that Clark's taken, like I know he's super tough, but he's also taken some damage too. That's a little bit concerning. Murzakanov, who we know is now really great. Like, that was a tough loss for him. He took a ton of damage in that one. We haven't really seen Kennedy take that much. I mean, I know Jung knocked him out, but in their fight, but in general, he hasn't really, Paul Craig submitted him. Paul Craig submitted everyone. So wouldn't really put too much past that. But I just give a slight lean towards Kennedy. He's a little bit younger, a little bit bigger here. I think if you got to take, one side here, I'm going to go with the guy that's a little bit younger, a little bit height and reach. Although saying that, Devin Clark's far better opposition.
True. And that's a great point too. The strength of schedule is definitely in his favor. So all right, there you go. I'm going to be taking Devin Clark. And that's the show today, man. I appreciate it. It's a quick hitter here. So I appreciate it, James. Let's do this again sometime, and let's make some money. Let's hit some bets.
Absolutely. Well, first, thanks for having me on, man. Really appreciate it. Absolutely. Would love to come back on again. Your listeners can check out all my stuff, youtube.com/Lynch on Sports. I have all my interviews in there on playlists, so it's easy to find. And that same handle, Lynch on Sports, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, I got you covered. And this is a lot of fun, man. I appreciate it. Tough card, by the way. People are like, hey, kind of wishy-washy. It's just a tough card, man. This is one of those cards that I think you're going to see a lot of upsets or a lot of fights that don't go how people think they're going to go, whether it's a winner or a loser. It's a tough one.
All right, man. It's going to be a fun night. UFC 288. Enjoy the fights, and we will do this again next weekend. Everybody, take care.